Gabriel benched for a second game in a row, and Man United midfielders underwhelm once again. There are so many hot topics from the game week just gone, and I'm going to discuss all of those in today's video. So make sure you do drop a like, and of course, smash that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's get into today's hot topics. So first off, I want to cover off 6 things from game week 2 that you may have missed. I think these are quite important going into the next game week. So first up, Saka didn't take the penalty for Arsenal, which is really surprising. I think we all went into this season expecting Saka to be the regular penalty taker. So when Odegaard stepped up and put it away, it started to add a few question marks on whether Arsenal are going for flexible penalty takers or Odegaard is simply taken the responsibility away from Saka. Regardless, this isn't a good thing for Saka. His numbers last season were very similar to that of Odegaard's and worse than Martinelli's. And if we're now taking penalties away from Saka, I think the question mark does raise, is Odegaard the better Arsenal asset? But again, we will discuss that in maybe a future video as we need to get a little bit more clarification on whether that is going to be a thing going forward from a penalty perspective. Now, second point, sticking on penalties, Watkins is off Aston Villa penalty duty. Now again, we haven't had any clarification from the manager whether this is exactly true going forward, but with Douglas Luiz stepping up, being on pretty much every set piece for Villa as it is, and him putting that penalty away so confidently, I'm going to sit here and tell you that I think Watkins is probably off penalties with Luiz now the regular one. And that makes Luiz quite an interesting asset and makes Watkins less and less interesting, as that was always such a great factor for him at 8 million being on penalties. Now he isn't. It is a little bit worrying as an FPL asset. Now, point number 3, Maddison left the stadium in a protective boot and on crutches, but we all think that it is just precautionary. There is a scan being done for his foot, and hopefully we'll have more information on that. And of course, I will update you when we do hear that. But it is worth noting, if you're looking to bring him in, I would wait until we get full evidence on what the actual extent of this injury is, or whether it was just for precautions. Now, another penalty incident was Enzo Fernandez at Chelsea stepping up to take the penalty. We've all had question marks about who is going to be the penalty taker at Chelsea, and he goes and misses against West Ham. So I think that makes it even more difficult for us to predict who is going to be the penalty taker for Chelsea in the absence of Reece James, who we were expecting to be that. So I think we just go with the assumption that there may be flexible penalty takers at Chelsea right now until we see back-to-back penalties scored for Chelsea. Now, point number 5, Solly March walked away with the highest XG of all midfielders in the game. Now, it's worth noting this is non-pen, as I like to look at the actual open play influence from midfielders. And Solly March, with his injury worries going into this season, has just been one of the picks to own, and not many people have gone for him, going for more Matomas. And even in Buemo, 1.33, he is looking fantastic, but it's worth noting European football is on the horizon for Brighton. And last up, Gusto at 4 million started as a Reece James replacement, playing 87 minutes. He needs to be on our radar because at 4 million, he might be the easy route into that Chelsea defence if he is going to play week in, week out. But those are your 6 things that you may have missed in game week 2. Now for the big topic from game week 2, and that is what to do with Gabriel. He has now had back-to-back benchings in both home games and now away games. Now going into the Crystal Palace game, I was adamant that because it was going to be a tough fixture, Arteta was going to fall back on Gabriel's experience and his partnership with Saliba at centre-back. And lo and behold, Arteta finds another way to bench Gabriel. So the back 4 in last night's game was Partey at right back, with Tomiyasu at left back and Saliba and White at centre backs. And that was just another worry that Arteta's able to actually adapt the defence, find more players to go in different positions off the back of the Timber ACL, and still not find room for Gabriel in the team. So it is worth noting as well, Arteta keeps stating that these are for tactical reasons, but there are some rumours going around on Twitter that there may be some Saudi links for Gabriel leaving Arsenal. So that may be another reason why he is getting benched, but there's no concrete evidence on that one, which is worth noting. Now, of course, the big question is, do we sell him or is there an argument to keep him? Well, off the back of the team announcement, I was absolutely adamant to sell Gabriel 100%. But there is a 1 or 2% reason to potentially keep him in your teams. And that's going to be off the back of the Tomiyasu red card. He had 2 yellow cards, meaning that he's going to miss game week 3. And at home against Fulham, I think a lot of people are saying to themselves, Gabriel is going to play. He's got no Tomiyasu. He's got no Timber. But the big worry about it is that it was the left-back position that has had the red card. And Zinchenko came on later on in the game, not as a direct replacement for Tomiyasu. And there is a chance that at home against Fulham, Arteta may earmark this as a great opportunity to put some minutes into Zinchenko's leg. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a back four of Zinchenko, Saliba, White and Partey in this game week 3 fixture, as they're going to dominate possession, and that's the main reason why Partey is playing at right back. Now, the one caveat I will say is the reason why Partey is playing at right back is that he will invert into the midfield alongside someone like a Declan Rice. If Zinchenko is going to play at left back, then one would argue that at right back Ben White will go there, as they need that overlapping run of Ben White, as you can't have both Partey and Zinchenko invert on one another, leaving just basically Tim White and Saliba at the back together. So now I know it's really difficult to predict, but I would say there is a chance Gabriel does start against Fulham, but the real reason is, end of the day, we are just going to have this headache week in, week out, whether Gabriel is going to start. And because of that reason, I think if you have 2 free transfers available, or one and no other fires to put out, he is a sell in my eyes. So based on replacements for Gabriel, I have ranked them here on your screens. And I've got a bit of a mixture here of price points for maybe those that have money in the bank, or those that are looking to maybe save a little bit of cash. Now, in third place is going to go to Man City's Gavardia, but I want to put a caveat here and say that I think all Man City options are great options, but they're also equally rotation risk. So I've picked out Gavardia, as I think it's just quite an interesting pick at 5 million. If you were going for guaranteed minutes and you had 0.5 million in the bank, I think Ruben Diaz is probably the route to go for. But I'm just assuming here that maybe you have no cash in the bank and you're looking to do a sideways move. I think Gavardia is interesting. Now, the reason why he's such a great pick, you're getting investment into the best defence in the league. Back-to-back clean sheets for Man City. And Gavardia started in game week 2 and came off the bench in game week 1. And of course, played for them in that Super Cup victory against Sevilla. I like it because it's an easy sideways move, and the fixtures long-term are amazing for Man City. It almost feels wrong not having any investment in the Man City team. Now, the problems, of course, you are buying into Pep Roulette. You would expect spending this much money on someone like Gavardia. He is going to play most weeks. But with Nathan Ake signing a new contract, both playing in very similar roles in this Man City team, I would argue that there is going to be times where Ake does get the nod over Gavardia. Now, of course, Akanji, Diaz, both probably safer routes if you want to go down that direction. So I don't knock anybody going down that route. And the other downgrade of Gavardia is limited attack and returns. We haven't necessarily seen Man City play with him bombing forward and influencing the final third. So you are going to be dependent on attacking corners, set pieces. So I would say he's quite limited to what he can produce. And we don't really know yet whether he is good on the bonus baseline. But it's worth noting the passes that they do rack up in defence, they're all quite good in that aspect. Now, number 2, I've gone for Rico Henry of Brentford. I am really, really interested in him as an option. And of course, being cheaper than 5 million, he frees up a little bit of money in the bank if you want to go elsewhere. Now, fixtures long-term for Brentford are fantastic, some of the best. And I really think you could confidently invest in Brentford knowing that he is going to offer clean sheet potential. Whereas some other teams you would look at and think, oh, I'm really dependent on attack and returns. I think they're good for a couple of clean sheets. He's also the cheaper asset, as I discussed, and attacking potential. We know, of course, that Brentford do go between a back 3 and a back 4, but I think he does offer attacking potential in both formations. So I don't think it's a hindrance if he was to play as a wing back or a traditional left back. The one downside about this is I feel like we might fall into triple Brentford potentially. A lot of us do have Mbeumo. A lot of us are very, very interested by Vissa at 6.1 million. And I think we could potentially fall on Henry as a Gabriel replacement. And all of a sudden, you might be looking at your team with a Brentford triple up. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing because the fixtures are great, but maybe it's not exactly what you want for your team. So I would just say that if you're considering Vissa as well, it might not be worth going for Henry if you don't want to go all in on these Brentford assets. But I think the number 1 pick, and rightly so, is going to be Ben Chilwell. Now, I know Chelsea were, I'm not going to say awful in game week 2, but of course, result-wise, wasn't good for their options at all. And Ben Chilwell did come off early, but I do think that was to kind of mix up the formation a little bit. I wouldn't say it was based totally on his performance. Now, what are the good things about Ben Chilwell? Well, he's one of the most bought defenders over the last few weeks, so his ownership is just continually creeping up. And if you don't own him and he goes off, you are really going to struggle from a rank perspective. Fixtures long-term are fantastic for Chelsea. We're Luton at home and Forest at home in the next 2. Brilliant picks in terms of those fixtures. And of course, the underlying stats for Ben Chilwell in general is fantastic, offering both expected goal and expected assist value. The one bad thing, you need some cash in the bank for this investment. So you either use your 2 free transfers, downgrade one and upgrade your Gabriel into him, or you have that money already sat in the bank to replace Gabriel to Chilwell. But this is how I'd rank the Gabriel replacements. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Right now, I am leaning towards a Man City defender personally, if I can pick out the right one. Now, one of the biggest disappointments in the opening few game weeks has been both Man United picks and just Man United in general. We were expecting these opening 3 fixtures to see them score plenty of goals and really start to hit the ground running under Ten Hag, but it really hasn't been the case. And with a lot of FPL managers doubling down on both Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, it's a lot of money that we've invested and a lot of reliance on them performing well. And I think a lot of us are starting to look and think there are better, cheaper options available. We can't put our trust in both of these. So what I've done is I've brought up the heat map and the underlying numbers from Fantasy Football Fix here to hopefully come to some sort of conclusion on what you should do right now. So first up, the touch heat map for Bruno Fernandes is exactly what we usually do expect from him. Plenty of touches in and around the outside of the box, trying to be that creator in the team. Few touches in the box, and of course on some set piece responsibility that you can see from the heat touch map in the corner there. Rashford, on the other hand, plenty more touches in the penalty area, which we can expect while he is playing as a number 9, and that new signing, Hoyland, whatever it is, hasn't actually got up to match fitness yet. We will expect Rashford to go off the left once he does return, and I think that's what we're all expecting right now, but the touches in the box are good for Rashford. Now, looking at the actual underlying numbers, we know they haven't scored a goal yet, otherwise we would be absolutely keeping them in our teams. But the expected goals for both of these isn't too bad at all. 1.38 for Marcus Rashford and 0.78 for Bruno Fernandes. I actually think these are some decent numbers. In particular, Marcus Rashford. They both had 7 shots. 2 of those, 2 on target for Rashford, but 7 of those are in the box for Marcus Rashford, which I think is quite a big deal here. We're never going to see Bruno Fernandes having the similar numbers in the box because he's such an influence on that edge of the box, creating chances while Mason Mount is just walking around the pitch. But I don't think he's as bad as what it is seeming. And of course, the expected assist for Bruno being 1.34, his overall expected involvement is one of the best in the league in terms of not actually getting a return so far. Marcus Rashford, on the other hand, isn't really being an influence creatively while he is that number 9. So while we are all panicking, looking to sell him, looking to go downgrade in the other departments, I do think, and I'm going to bring the fixtures up, in particular this Nottingham Forest at home game, is just not the right time to be selling them as we speak. I think this is a great opportunity maybe to be a bit more different and hold on to the double up, as while others are moving away, this might be the last chance saloon for them. I know Man United have been poor, but it just feels like the wrong time to sell them. And I actually don't mind these underlying numbers from a FPL perspective. So as I mentioned, should FPL managers sell Bruno and Rashford? I get it. I know we're frustrated. I know we want to get rid of them, but I just think based on the game week 3 fixture, I would wait one more week. The alternatives available, like a Maddison, we need to wait on an injury status. Man City, of course, Foden's a great option, but are his minutes guaranteed? And then we're looking at maybe some of the 6.5 options available. For me, Forest at home is just a great opportunity to say, I'm going to give you boys one more week. Hopefully you will get a reaction from Man United, and then we can maybe look to move away from the one that is not offering the value. And right now, I probably would say that is Marcus Rashford. Now, if you are sat there and you're saying, Nacho, I like you, but you are just chatting a little rubbish, I want to sell one or both of those, then the 2 that I would target is both James Maddison and Phil Foden, as I discussed. I think James Maddison, if he's confirmed fit, just long term is one of those you just put in your team and you accept that he's going to be the heartbeat of everything good at Spurs, and you just keep him until Christmas. Phil Foden, on the other hand, I think you need to jump on probably around this game week. Just get 1 week ahead of everyone else while he's playing away against Sheffield United, because I do think his minutes are at a little bit of risk, as they always are, but his ceiling is so much higher than that of James Maddison's. So those are the 2 that I would prioritise from a value perspective. Of course, if you're not sat there with an Embuemo at 6.5, that is an easy route for you maybe to free up some funds. Come from Rashford all the way down to an Embuemo, free up cash to invest elsewhere in the squad. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. For me, I think I'm going to hold him for one more week. So another big problem for FPL managers right now is the popular pick in Joao Pedro getting benched in game week 2. He was fantastic in game week 1. We know that he is likely going to be the penalty taker in the team. but he ended up getting benched and only playing 30 minutes as a substitute in game week 2. Now, of course, I think we were all expecting this from Joao Pedro and Brighton in general. There's going to be so much rotation in that team with Europa League on the horizon. I think this is just going to be a week in, week out thing where whoever plays in the Europa League is going to play in the Premier League. And we haven't even got to that stage yet. So there is a lot of question marks whether the value of Joao Pedro is worth keeping or selling. I understand why managers are panicking right now. And the big question is he going to be benched in game week 3? And unfortunately, we just really don't know that right now. It's so hard to call with so many options available, like in Ciso, Welbeck, Ferguson, that can all take guaranteed game time away from Joao Pedro. I do think that he is still a great option for game week 3. There's no denying if he is to start at home against West Ham. But I think the big problem is, can we guarantee this? And if he is your second forward alongside Haaland, I think there are so many other forward options available that offer guaranteed game time and as good underlying numbers that it's worth probably selling him, especially if you are in a situation where you have 2 free transfers, because maybe moving your team around is just going to give you an opportunity to restructure it and not have to fall back on a player at 5.5 million who is a massive rotation risk in your team. So for me, if you had the flexibility in the transfers available, I would sell Joao Pedro. And here's some of my top replacements. Now, similar to the Gabriel situation, I have ranked these based on how I feel they should be preferenced in your teams. Number 3 is going to be Alvarez at 6.5 million. I think it is unbelievable value to get an investment in the Man City attack at this price bracket. It is outrageous. And it is worth noting he has started 90 minutes in both of the last 2 Premier League games. So his minutes are actually looking pretty solid in the Pep Guardiola, and the fixtures long term are unbelievable. So it feels like Alvarez is just an option available to us that we just need to jump in. But the big problem for me is Pep Roulette just exists. They've now signed Doku. I don't know how that's going to influence the Man City team. I just think it is one of those things where you're going to go from a rotation risk in Joao Pedro to another rotation risk in Julian Alvarez. Now, if Julian Alvarez is going to be your third forward, I don't mind it at all, because you can just potentially play him, and if he doesn't come on, you've got a strong bench maybe to replace him in your team. But I'm just a little bit worried about his game time going forward long term. I think Pep can change things up. And the other question mark we need to ask ourselves is he even the best Man City alternative, or is Phil Foden that? Because if you are to jump in on Alvarez and then another game week passes and we say to ourselves, Foden is the one, all of a sudden you might go into the next game week with Haaland, Alvarez and Foden in your team, and you're tripled out, blocked out from maybe going for defensive assets. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing having triple, but you maybe want to have that option at least available for yourself to go into those defensive assets at some point. So look, Alvarez is unbelievable, and if you could sit here and tell me he's going to play 90 minutes every single game week between now and Christmas, just put him at number 1. He is an auto pick in all of our teams, but I just can't personally guarantee that game time. Now, Visser is another one who I think minutes are a little bit at risk. Now, his long-term fixtures are fantastic. He's a cheaper asset as well, as it's worth noting, compared to the other 3. So if you're looking to move from Joao Pedro, you don't need as much money available. And it's also worth noting, this kind of all is similar to the Watkins situation as well. So if you're looking to sell Watkins, going down to someone like a Visser is going to free up so much money in the bank. And the underlying stats for Visser are actually brilliant. He has the highest XG of all forwards in the league after the last 2 game weeks. But the big problem is, the regular thing that is happening is he is an early substitute, coming off around the 70th, 75th minute. And long term, as we know, injury time is being added on to the Premier League games. Those minutes are going to really accumulate, and he's going to miss out on a lot of game time. Whereas someone like a Jackson, or maybe even Alvarez, if he does start week in, week out, it's just going to absolutely accumulate over time. And it's worth noting as well, as I have discussed, is Mbeumo plus Ovisa a bit of an overkill in the Brentford attack? I know Brentford have started the season really well, but do you want to look at your team with both of those Brentford attackers in, week out, knowing that you're basically going to have to start them in every fixture for the next 4 weeks? That's the only caveat I would say, because Visser has been unbelievable at the start of this year. But number 1, I am just going to go for Nicholas Jackson. Now, as I said, if you could tell me Alvarez is going to start week in, week out, then he is absolutely number 1, no questions asked. But I think because of the injuries at Chelsea to Nkunku, Broja, I think Jackson simply is going to start every single game week between now and the foreseeable future. So his game time's locked in. His underlying stats are really, really good. I think he's top 3 for XG. Missed a few big chances, which is a bad thing, but he's also getting into the areas, which is always a positive from an FPL perspective. And the fixtures are unbelievable. At home against Luton and at home against Nottingham Forest. They don't come much better than that. But as I mentioned, he is the most expensive of the lot, so you are going to need quite a bit of funds to invest from Joao Pedro in your team, or if you are a Watkins owner and you're looking to downgrade, you will have less money in the bank once you do that move. It's also worth noting Chelsea are in the market for another attacking option. We don't know whether that's a forward or a number 10 potentially, but it is just worth noting that. But for the foreseeable future, I think Nicolas Jackson is just the wise move to go for. I think Chelsea, even though they have had a bad result in the last two, have shown some positive signs. And I do expect Nicolas Jackson to do well over the next 2 game weeks. And I think he is more of the safer bet of these 3 options. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, last up, I just want to quickly remind you about the unbelievable fixtures for Game Week 3. I think during this video, during a lot of the last 24 hours, we've been discussing about how we have to sell Man United midfielders, we have to sell Gabriel, we have to sell Watkins, all that. I think we need to remind ourselves the fixtures are great and fixtures are king end of the day. Yes, a team might have done bad for the last 2, but maybe they were playing against a better opposition. Some of these fixtures are incredible, and I've put my current team on screen here just to remind you. So Brighton at home against West Ham. I know West Ham done a number on Chelsea, but I think this is a great game for Brighton, and it could be for Joao Pedro. Chelsea at home against Luton. Arsenal at home against Fulham. I know everyone's disappointed right now with both Saka and Martinelli, but it isn't the game time to sell them. And of course, as I mentioned, the Man United home game against Nottingham Forest. Yes, you might be desperate to sell them. Yes, you might be thinking to yourself, I'm going to have to do a points hit. Then you need to look out, span out, macro view and say to yourself, but is the fixture that bad? And I really don't think it is. Even someone like Watkins, people are getting trigger happy and wanting to sell him. Away against Burnley is honestly not a bad fixture at all, especially if you did watch Aston Villa against Everton. They were incredible in the attacking phases. So this is just a reminder here that I'm a Gabriel owner. The fixtures are not bad. And yes, you might need to pull the trigger on certain players, but other ones that you are a little bit worried about, it just might not be the time to do it. So take myself, for example, I will sell Gabriel this week because he is just a rotation risk in the future. But look at those fixtures of Man United. I don't have to make that move this week. I can hold off on that transfer and not fall on those points hits. So again, let me know your thoughts in the comment section about your transfers going into Game Week 3. But for me, I think Gabriel being sold is the right route for my team, and I will be doing a transfer plans video tomorrow, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Yes guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's video. I really hope it has provided some value to you and answers some of those hot topics that I know a lot of people are pulling their hair out over. If you did enjoy it, make sure you do drop a like and smash that subscribe button. I'll be releasing my Game Week 3 transfer plan video tomorrow, so make sure you do have notification bells switched on so you do not miss that video, as of course with 2 free transfers I have a lot of plans in my head that I need to talk about. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.